Hello, welcome to another video with yours truly, Zoë Ligon. I am here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects to discuss within the realm of human sexuality, and that is circumcision and foreskin. What's the deal with it? Before I get started talking about this, it's important for me to give you a little bit of cultural context. I was born and raised in the United States. I currently live in the Midwest. And here in the United States, circumcision is pretty much the norm. Now, not everybody is circumcised, but especially in the Midwest, we actually happen to have the highest rates of circumcision, whereas the West Coast has the lowest rates. But of all the countries in the world, we don't circumcise our penises in the highest rates. Countries like Israel, where the Jewish faith really highly influences this choice, as well as majority Muslim countries, many countries in Northern Africa actually have even higher rates of circumcision than here in the US. I'm coming to you today as a Jew, actually, living in the United States. And just to put it all out there, as a Jew, I am very against circumcision. When I express this opinion, people will call me anti-Semitic, generally, until they learn I'm a Jew, so I will just put that out there from the get-go. The majority of people in the United States who are getting circumcised are not doing it for religious reasons. So, why do people circumcise their children's penises if they're not religious? The most common reason I hear is that fathers want their sons' penises to look like theirs. And that's a thing. But also I hear a lot of parents saying, I don't want my kid to be made fun of, meaning that they know that foreskin is not the norm, and what would the other boys have to say in the locker room if they saw my son's foreskin? That is a problem that we as a society have created for ourselves. I think it's really bizarre and inhumane to remove a part of your child's body because you're afraid they're going to be teased for it when it's a normal, natural part of the human body. And we make fun of it. And because the mainstream porn industry kind of took off in the San Fernando Valley, you see a lot of cut penises in porn, further perpetuating that this is what hot, sexy penis is supposed to look like. Why did we even begin circumcising in the first place? We actually began circumcising penises in the United States because of hygienic reasons during World War I and times when people didn't have access to running water. You know, there's things like trench warfare where you your toes would get infected because you'd just be marinating in gunk for days. It made sense in the military to begin removing foreskin just because it got so easily infected. And you'd think, oh, that's just another thing like the wisdom teeth or tonsils. They're useless. Let's just remove them because they get infected easily. Except foreskin actually has a very important purpose. The truth is that it's really not that difficult to clean foreskin. All you have to do is gently retract the foreskin, swipe a finger around in there. You don't even need soap. You can just rinse it off with water. And if you do that every day, you're not going to get an infection. We have so many other body parts that require maintenance, like, our fingernails or our ears, but we don't chop them off because they're a little bit more difficult to maintain than other parts of our body. What does a foreskin do? The foreskin is homologous to the clitoral hood. And the clitoral hood is a piece of skin that covers the external portion of the clit, keeps it moist, keeps it protected from the elements, and it keeps it sensitive so that it's not brushing up against stuff all the time and touching things. The foreskin is essentially the clitoral hood on a penis. It covers the head of the penis, keeps it moist and sensitive. It also serves a very important function for pleasure. The foreskin is a thin piece of skin that rolls along the head and essentially is like a masturbation sleeve. It is nature's masturbation sleeve. If you see somebody masturbating with foreskin, they're generally moving it up and down along the head of the penis, kind of like indirectly stimulating the head of the penis through the foreskin. But what's really awesome about foreskin also is that if you're having penetrative sex, The foreskin also naturally reduces friction by moving with the inner lining of the body. How cool is that? And not to say that, like, the friction can't be remedied with lube for those of us who don't have foreskin, but it does kind of like promote the vaginal and anal canals not like drying out as quickly when you have a thin piece of skin that's moving with the motions. Foreskin really just gives you another way to experience pleasure. Here in the United States, not only do we not really talk about pleasure, we just don't talk about foreskin, period, except for when people are cracking jokes at it. It's very difficult to talk about because so many people are circumcised in the United States. It brings up a lot of intense emotions to think about, wait a minute, there's a part of my body that was removed and I didn't have any say in it. I can only imagine how violating it would feel to really think about these things, especially for the first time. What I say to people who are concerned, like, wait a minute, there's this body part with a pleasure function that was removed. You have a right to be very angry about that. That's a very valid feeling. But at the same time, it does not limit your ability to experience pleasure in this world. I think that we need to start really considering our choices moving forward as a generation, as we begin to start having kids, and starting to think, okay, why am I just mindlessly doing this thing? Let's give it more consideration. Just because it happened to you doesn't mean that your kids must experience it as well. We are all capable of experiencing pleasure, foreskin or not. It's just a really beautiful part of the body that doesn't need to be removed. So another myth I hear about foreskin is that it increases your chances of getting HIV if you have a foreskin. Now, I just want to break down where the thought behind that is coming from. Essentially, the mindset is that the foreskin is a thin piece of skin, therefore it's prone to tearing. That would just kind of be like saying the inner labia are delicate tissues, so let's just remove them. Or like, oh, the anal lining is really delicate, so we should never have anal sex. It's a preventative thing that is done, and there was a time and place for it, especially during the AIDS crisis of the 80s, and to this day in countries where HIV/AIDS is still spreading and there is not access to medication. But we live in the United States where we have PrEP available to us. We have antiretroviral medication available to us. Using condoms is a really great way of preventing the spread of HIV, regardless of whether you have foreskin or not. Having foreskin is not high risk, and I get so angry when I hear major medical institutions spreading this lie. This can honestly be a really triggering conversation for a lot of people, whether you are circumcised, whether you are a parent who has chosen to circumcise your child. I don't think that you have any reason to feel ashamed. It's really our society's fault for perpetuating the myths and lies and continuing the silence around why we just blindly circumcise universally. We circumcise children at birth and don't give it a second thought. I think that this is 100% a thing that we need to protect our boys and men from, and anybody else with a penis. Yeah, I am angry about it because it's fucked up that people have been programmed to think that circumcised penises are not only healthier and more beautiful, but just like a symbol of masculinity. Meanwhile, people with intact penises are like made fun of. People think that it's gross in the United States. Bottom line is that removing any genital tissue from anybody is a violation of bodily autonomy. I had a little bit of a different experience growing up, coming into my own sexuality. I had partners with intact penises, and just want to make a note that I say intact as opposed to uncircumcised or uncut, because terms like that really normalize genital cutting, whereas intact just means like it's an intact penis. It doesn't normalize circumcision. And throughout my life, I've seen penises with foreskin that are so large that when they're erect, the head of the penis is still fully covered by the foreskin. And I've also seen people with foreskin who in the flaccid state, you can barely even tell that they have foreskin and they actually look circumcised. So just like every body part, foreskin comes in all shapes and sizes. I don't believe in God personally, but if God were real, she would want us to leave our bodies as is. Just saying. So listen. Maybe you're a parent who has chosen to circumcise their child, and I don't want you to feel ashamed or guilty. It's really worth revisiting why you chose to make that decision for your own reflection, but none of us are given information or a choice when it comes to this stuff. We are pressured into it by doctors, by society. It's a thing like breastfeeding where we choose to do it less because of the social awkwardness of it, when in reality there are so many health benefits to breastfeeding. It's one of those things where we've just chosen to go with what's socially accepted instead of grappling with questions and wondering why we do these things in the first place. If you are considering having a child, just give it a second thought. That is all I ask. You can choose to get yourself circumcised as an adult, but you can't put foreskin back on your body. I actually know of people who have chosen to use weights and stretching to regrow the foreskin, and while it won't be the same exact piece of tissue, there are people who can aesthetically create the look of a foreskin. There are also prosthetic foreskins, which generally don't tend to be functional, but again, create the aesthetics of a foreskin if you desire that. Really, the only time that there is any medical need for circumcision is the rare occurrence where somebody's foreskin is so tight that it is painful for them. If somebody's foreskin is too tight, they might choose to have a full or partial circumcision in order to alleviate that pain, but this is a really rare thing and not something that you would ever want to preventatively remove the foreskin for. In fact, it's more common to see circumcisions that have been done incorrectly. I have slept with well over 100 people, so if that is any data statistic, out of the 100+ partners I have been intimate with, 2 people have had incorrectly done circumcisions where there were skin flaps and folds that were left behind by the circumcision. It wasn't exactly painful for them, but these men felt pretty insecure about what their penis looked like. On a personal level, I did not find it weird, but it's worth taking note that there are actually many instances of circumcisions being done incorrectly. If you have never interacted with a foreskin before or are not entirely sure how to interact with one, I will give you a few parting tips on how to stimulate a penis with a foreskin. The most important piece of advice I can give you is ask and communicate. Watch how they stimulate their penis. Ask them what kind of stimulation they like. Just be like, I've never interacted with a foreskin before. Show me the ropes. If you aren't sure what foreskin looks like or how it moves and behaves, you can Google it. There's a lot of porn that features penises with foreskins out there on the internet, and that's a great way of learning how it moves and behaves. In general, you also treat it like the clitoral hood. Much like a clitoral hood, you don't just yank it back and go to town on the head of the penis. You gently stimulate it through the foreskin generally. Ultimately, whatever the individual person wants is going to be a lot more helpful information than I can ever tell you. If you're concerned that it has a weird taste, all genitals have a weird taste. Bodies are both disgusting and beautiful. Gunk, smegma, just a fact of life. Clits actually get smegma too, but we just don't talk about it. No matter what your penis looks like, I assure you that it is both beautiful and disgusting. Alright, well, I could honestly write a dissertation on circumcision and foreskin and all the stigma and myths surrounding it. I'm going to link in the caption to an article I've written about interacting with circumcised and intact penises. I'm also going to link to a very interesting article about Jews in Israel who have chosen to not circumcise. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I know that there are a lot of intactivists out there. Again, this is just something I really want to draw attention to. Even in the sex education community, it is not talked about enough. So thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you soon.